You're watching Global Trade This Week with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Okay, here we are, Global Trade This Week. I am one of your co-hosts, Doug Draper, and I am sporting some important attire this show because of some sad news that everybody received on Saturday morning. At least that's when I had heard it. One of the favorite artists of my other co-host on the other coast, Mr. Pete Mento. Pete, I'm going to try to throw as many Jimmy Buffett sayings on here. So I'm just going to say you are a son of a sailor, or son of a bitch. I'm not really sure. But Pete, thanks for joining us today, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing good, pal. I'm doing good. I'm coming to you from outside of Washington, D.C. I am in our office here from DSV's office in Herndon, Virginia. And I mentioned at the beginning of the call today that Herndon is a lot like the Cheesecake Factory of cities. It's thinks a lot of itself, but it really isn't all that impressive. It's just a big fancy diner of a town. And our office, however, is gorgeous. It's very nice. And people here are fantastic. So I'm here all week. I have meetings in DC and meetings with a bunch of lobbying groups and meetings with clients. And I'm pretty fired up to be here this week. So DC this week, New York City next week for some speaking engagements. And then I'll be in the office. Week after that, I will be in Portland, Oregon for the big FDRA show, which I'm fired up for. And then, Doug, I'll be in California.
Nice. Hopefully in the great city of Fresno, California, but my assumption is no.
No, I'll be in San Diego, pal. I'll be in San Diego.
Yeah, even better. Well, it looks like they put you up in the corner office there at the DSV Herndon.
Yeah, it's nice. It really is. It's really nice, man. You know, our industry, most of the places I've worked, you're in like some really crappy office over a warehouse, like in some really sketchy neighborhood by the airport, but it's stepped up. Like our industry has stepped up in the past 10, 15 years. And we sort of moved away from those really terrifying neighborhoods where the rats look like raccoons. And, been definitely the case with the unit I'm with now, really, really nice offices.
All right. So you're not jumping on a forklift to unload an ocean container or anything after the show?
You don't want me doing that. I think everyone's insurance rates would go catastrophic if that happened. I'm not prepared to do that kind of work anymore. I've lost that touch, pal.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, again, my shirt is in honor of the great Jimmy Buffett. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the show, but this is Global Trade. It's this week, and so we should probably get started, Pete. So what's your first topic?
Yeah, buddy. So my friend Captain Alex Suhanoff, had sent me an article this week on just the investment that's being made by both the United States and Chinese companies, Chinese individuals as well, corporations, into the Marianas. And there's a lot of Pacific islands that most of us just don't think about. And I think about them because I've spent a lot of time there. A lot of time just sitting around, Doug. Just sitting around, man. Just sitting around on a ship. In my youth, in my teens and my 20s, with my finger up my nose, drinking coffee with nothing to do, just sitting on a ship, taking containers off, putting containers on, sitting on an idle ship, missing home, pre-internet, reading some book. But they hold incredible strategic importance. And these islands during World War II were important to the Japanese because they created an island chain that allowed them to establish a supply chain for hopefully an eventual invasion of North America. And we look at them now as our lifeline toward Asia. And they have created a strategic string of islands toward Russia that was that as well. But they're kind of out of sight, out of mind. When I tell people Saipan, when I tell people Guam, when I say to folks, have you heard of Truk? How about Vanuatu? I'm like, are you talking about some alien species from Star Trek? I'm like, no, man. Like these are islands in the middle of the Pacific. Like I got friends right now in Diego Garcia sitting on a pre-positioning ship playing World of Warcraft for 13 hours a day when they're not. I mean, these are real places. But the reason that the Marianas are so important is it's kind of the back door to the United States. It's the best way to describe it. It's an island chain that is the farthest reaches of the American empire, and it's the closest to China. So they are an American possession. They are, I guess, technically part of the United States, if I'm being specific, and Guam is part of that as well. And the U.S. has recently gotten pretty serious about trying to be a little more robust about establishing it as a place where we're going to be positioning stuff. We're going to be getting a little more aggressive with making sure that we have supplies there. And the Chinese have also started to get a little more aggressive about their position in that part of the world, namely by putting things like casinos up there and investing financially and kind of doing the good guy thing. You know, we've invested a lot of money here and we've made a lot of jobs here. But the one thing that hasn't really happened, Doug, is our industry hasn't invested a lot there. I spent a little time this morning before I left for work looking at the companies that are building up a presence there for logistics. And it's mainly very small transportation firms that are locally owned that are agents of mostly Asian logistics firms. There are some FedEx agents out there, but that's about it. They're tiny family owned 7, 8, employee transportation companies working out of strip malls. That's it. So I'm wondering, as I go through these small island chains and I look at the transportation firms there, who's going to be investing? Well, I'll tell you, everybody. So I think that the future of these little island chains and their importance on establishing that new fence on the western rim of the Pacific for America's defensive position, I think you're going to see a pretty big investment by transportation firms out there, Doug.
Yeah, that's interesting, Pete, but I'm going to say no. That doesn't.
Wrong.
We don't contradict each other much, right? But I don't know, man. First of all, whenever you said the Marianas, I was like, what? What are you talking about? So here's my take, right? I think you nailed it. There was some garment industry for a while that kind of tanked, and then they came in with the casinos, and then it's tourism. And I just don't, maybe from a military perspective, to set up shop, right? Kind of what you had spoken about earlier. But I mean, to go, why? There's no purpose to have any juggernaut transportation logistics up. Like, why stop there, right? There's enough ships and support. Let's get these things to where they need to get quickly. It's not like it's the 1800s where you need to jump off 3 or 4 times to get across the ocean, right? So I don't know. Militarily, yes. Is that going to bring some revenue to those islands? Yes. Is it going to have somebody dredge a port and have it as a cross dock type of thing? I don't think that would ever happen. But yeah, so interesting from the military perspective. Other than that, I don't think there's a whole lot going to change in 50 years in that area.
Well, that's the only perspective, Doug, is the military perspective. I think it's a defense outpost, and our ongoing attempts to do everything that we can to cordon off any sort of Chinese expansion. And I believe that is why that part of the world is going to develop. And I think that you're going to see an aggressive defense footing happen in that part of the world. And that's why.
Okay. Interesting.
All right. But what do you got?
Yes. So my topic, and this is more, I don't have an answer, right? You and I come on here, we have a topic, we give our perspective, and this one I'm just confused about, so I'm going to need your assistance on this, right? So it's all about airlines, air freight, pilot shortages, and how all these trajectories are going in different directions that I can't wrap my head around, right? So, first of all, the FAA just the other day, I think I got this off Freightwaves, maybe, that they were suspecting that nearly 5,000 former military pilots that are primarily zipping around in cargo planes had either left out or blatantly lied about medical conditions when they came out of the military. At the same time, they were telling the VA that, hey, I'm really sick and I need this support from the VA, but they're telling the FAA, no, everything's cool, and I just kind of left that out. So there's this investigation of 5,000 pilots, right, which is out there. So we'll see how that plays out. My take is they'll peel the onion back. There won't be a whole lot there, but that's a big headline right now. 5,000 military pilots that are now doing cargo. Then UPS is offering some of their senior pilots buyouts due to volume slowdowns, right? As far as the overnight, I think there's like 167 pilots. That's what a news outlet in Louisville, Kentucky is talking about. For overnight, revenues are down like 10%, volumes down like 12%. So I get it, right? So here's all these pilots that are, it's only 100 and some odd, but still, here's 5,000 pilots that may have to get a new job. Here's some pilots from UPS that are going out. And then, oh, by the way, all we hear about is a pilot shortage, right? Airlines, aircraft, there's not enough people in the skies to move things around. So that's the people part of it. The cargo part of it is you have people like companies like Maersk that are buying air freight to get vertically integrated. They're buying air freight companies. You talk about, I think, God, somebody just opened up and expanded operations in Detroit, right? So you have all these companies that are growing into it. And then you have comments from CNN and USA Today that's about there's a tsunami of pilot shortages. Congress has to tackle the pilot shortages. So you got these pilots that potentially could have availability. You have some freight companies that are growing their fleet. You have some companies that are contracting their fleet, and UPS is saying their volumes are down. So you have different entities going in different directions, and I can't figure out who's going to be right, who's going to be wrong, what's going on with the air freight market in general, right? It skyrocketed during the pandemic. Everybody jumped into it, resources, money, the whole bit. That went stagnant. Some people are still building. Some people are still getting out. I just can't wrap my head around the air freight industry right now and the pilot shortage, how those come together, and how those trajectories are just not hitting each other. So I don't know. Maybe I'm naive or missing something. I just can't figure it out.
Well, that's a lot to unpack. So first of all, I would like to know what these medical issues are that make these veterans unable, what makes them ineligible to serve as cargo pilots. What could they possibly be? And is it vision stuff? Because I imagine there's a way that they can deal with that. I don't know what it could possibly be. So I would be fascinated to find out what that is.
And they're holding it close to their vest, right? There's not a lot of info on that right now. But you're right. It could be pretty minuscule in the big picture.
Yeah. And then I'm sure that there's probably, you must age out of that career at some point. Because I would imagine that a lot of these pilots, they get out of their service for the military after 20 some odd years. They're probably in their 40s. And then they want to fly for another 10, 15, 20 years. So they can double dip in a retirement. Hey, good for them, right? So is it an age thing? I don't know. I absolutely have no idea. I think that there's a parallel here, though, of what you have in the Merchant Marine, which is a desire to not have to use American labor. A lot of the Merchant Marine now, there is a international code that allows you to not have to use officers and crew unless it's an American flag vessel because of the Jones Act. You can use international officers because we have one standard now for crewing. And many of these officers have a much lower expectation of their wage. So because we're all trained the same, because we're all tested the same, an officer from one country will have a significantly lower wage expectation than one from the West. So you can have a Chinese officer or an officer from India or Pakistan who might want, I don't know what the numbers are, but let's say it's half what an officer from Norway or an officer from the United Kingdom or the United States or Canada would want. Who do you think they're going to hire? And that's just simple economics. And I'm wondering if this is something that, will eventually just be a question of economics. If he's been trained or she's been trained the exact same way, and if they're able to move cargo the exact same way, then what's to stop a cargo carrier from using someone who has a much lower wage expectation and lives in an economy that has a much lower cost of living from flying cargo or flying people for that matter? So that's an interesting take on it. Second of all, Doug, it's a word you hate, buddy. Drones. Drones. Why wouldn't you move cargo with drones? There's safety, of course. The idea of having a 747 or, an A330 or A30, what are those big ones from the Ukraine or from Ukraine? What are they called? The
Antonov?
Antonov, like an Antonov full of oil and gas parts flying over your house in the middle of Colorado with nobody actually flying it. That'd be pretty creepy. But maybe that's where this is going, man. Maybe the pilot will be somebody sitting in their basement. I don't know, man. Maybe that's part of it as well. But I can remember it wasn't all that long ago. They were talking about how there were so many pilots that they didn't have to pay them very much because they had plenty of them. It's like this driver thing, man. It's feast or famine, and then they treat them like crap, and they leave the industry, and they wonder where they all went. They unionize the crap out of these people, pass laws that force them to use them, and how about we have a little respect for labor around here? I don't want to get angry again. I've gotten angry on this show like 4 weeks in a row, and my blood pressure. I don't want to have to be on pills, Doug. So can we just not? I just don't want to get angry this week, man. I don't want to get angry.
Yeah. Well, that is a good transition to our halftime, and of course, it's brought to you by Cap Logistics. So please visit Cap at caplogistics.com or capworldwide.com. Yeah, but anyway, in celebration of the shirt and talk about keeping blood pressure low, Pete, I'm going to let you go first. I have a couple of comments on it as well, but take it away on the halftime.
Yeah, man. So last week in our live Casa Bonita special, another we cannot say it enough. Big thank you to the Cap Logistics team. Huge thank you to Keenan. I guess we'll say thank you to Keenan for coming out, lugging everything out, and all the hard work that the team did to give us that live show. A big screw right off to the DJ at Westfax Brewery for doing everything he could to ruin our live shot.
Yeah.
But
hashtag disappointment.
Yeah. But in all honesty, thank you so much to Westfax Brewing for letting us do a live show there. It was incredibly kind of them. Great beer. If you're ever in the neighborhood, please just stop by. Absolutely fantastic brewery. Wonderful beer. Nice spot. During the show, they played Margaritaville. And I stopped the show. I interrupted Doug, as I often do, because I am a selfish jackass. And I said, I just have to stop. And I don't know if I've ever talked about how much I love Jimmy Buffett. And I talked about meeting Jimmy and how I was very fortunate that a friend of mine worked on his show, and how that friend of mine very selflessly made sure that I got to spend a lot of time with Jimmy, because he knew how much it meant to me, and how I got to form a relationship with not just Jimmy, but a lot of members of the Coral Reefer Band, and how that was like a defining part of my life and what that meant to me, and how, I've probably been to damn near 40 Jimmy Buffett shows, and how when you're a sailor and when you're a merchant mariner, it doesn't matter if you were a metalhead your whole life. It doesn't matter if you grew up on a tractor. It doesn't matter if you grew up, and I have friends where they grew up in like the streets of the Bronx. It doesn't matter if you're from Panama or you're from China. You're gonna end up loving Jimmy Buffett, because the guy wrote about being on beaches and working on boats and being in all kinds of far-flung places. And he just becomes a part of our vernacular and a part of our culture. And at my school, at Maine Maritime Academy, there are a couple of songs that were like our unofficial school songs: Son of a Sailor and A Pirate Looks at 40.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a couple dozen beers in you, we're going to start singing them. All of us. And it could be someone who graduated last year, or somebody who graduated 40 years ago. We're all going to sing them. And a couple days later, Jimmy dies after I talked about that. And the Jimmy I had met and the Jimmy I got to be around was so full of life, and he was so happy. And you could not be around that guy and not just be happy. And my friend who worked for him, he said the same thing. The guy was just endlessly joyful. And being at his concerts, endlessly joyful. Hearing his music, endlessly joyful. So it was when I woke up at 3:00 in the morning on Saturday because I couldn't sleep, and I turned on Twitter, and it was the first thing I saw. And I had about a 10-second moment where I was really sad. And then I said, how can I be sad about such a wonderful life? And how can I be sad about all of these great songs and all this joy that is still here in the world, and I'm not going to be sad? So, but before I hand it over to Doug, there's a line in two of his songs. The first one is from The Wino and I Know, where the song's about New Orleans and just being a young guy with nothing in your pocket but joy everywhere, where he says the coffee's strong at the Cafe Du Monde and the donuts are too hot to touch. But just like a fool when those sweet goodies cool, I'm going to eat till I eat way too much, because I'm living off things that excite me, be they pastries or lobsters or love. I'm just trying to get by being quiet and shy in a world full of pushing and shoving. And from the time I first heard that as a teenager until today, I think it's just something I've always believed in. And then the other is from one particular harbor. There's a place somewhere out there that all of us retreat to that's full of joy and hope. And his music was always that way for me. So This one's for you, Jimmy. I've been saying that a lot. Saturday, when I'm down in Virginia, I'm going to have a cheeseburger and I'm going to drink about 7,000 margaritas. And I think we're going to start with the first record until nobody can stand up anymore. And there's going to be a lot of laughing. There's not going to be any crying. But for those of you who are parrot heads, I feel for you. I think we feel for each other. All right, Doug, that's it. I'm done whining.
I'll make one comment on that, and then I'll jump into my halftime. Right, you met the guy, but I think his, the magic that he gave with songs was when people have a memory on every song. Not every song. There is a song in which you have a memory that you can smile and take away from you. Right. So here's mine. This is a long story. I'm going to condense because I know people didn't show up to listen to us talk about Jimmy Buffett. But in college, senior year spring break, there was 23 of us that drove from Lawrence, Kansas to Miami. We chartered two sailboats. Each one had a captain. One was Salty Ed. I think he was drunk the whole time, and we left Miami. The other guy's name was Richard. He was kind of a dud. We left Miami at night during the sunset in one particular harbor. We just cranked, and we were sitting there sailing, and some dolphins came up next to us, and we shot over to the Bahamas and just listened to Jimmy Buffett. So every time I hear one particular harbor, I can literally envision that from 30 odd years ago and doing it. And then on the way home, we stopped by Bimini, and then we had a whole reflection on Hemingway and went to the bar that he wrote some of his novels and everything else. But that's kind of the memory that I always think. And just on Saturday, I sent a text message to all 22 of those guys about that, and just got tons of feedback. But Pete, I was thinking that if there was ever a mic drop moment where somebody would be drinking their last margarita, it was Friday before the Labor Day weekend, right? So he gave the world a gift of 3 days off to have a whole lot of fun. And I guarantee every single beach, every single lake, and every single party over this weekend was cranking Jimmy Buffett. And that's exactly what he would have wanted to happen people
Yeah.
celebrating and enjoying life. So anyway, the fast. My quick thing is Burning Man. Now, for some of our audience, you may not know, I'm the guy with the straight, always wear a collar on the show. I went to Burning Man in 2016. Phenomenal experience. There's a couple of videos out there, not of me, but of parodies of how people feel when they come back from Burning Man. And I was the same way. Amazing experience. If you have a chance to go, go. It's kind of expensive nowadays. I think I dropped several $1,000s to get out there and participate. And we were on a camp right on the edge. So we had to do a whole bunch of stuff. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. But anyway, as you probably have heard, that it rained on Friday, turned it into a pile of mud. And Keenan was telling us before the show, the dirt out there has some properties that make it super gooey. His words were a little bit more scientific than that, but the goo, and I can't even fathom being out there whenever the mud and the chaos. And there are still people, as we are talking right now, that are trying to get out of Burning Man. So I'm so glad that I didn't, that the weather was good when I was out there and had one hell of a time. But wow, man, that is crazy. It's absolutely crazy how the weather can come in and Mother Nature, between fires and floods and hurricanes, she just dropped a whole hell of a lot of water and wrecked Burning Man for this year.
If you asked 100 people which one of us had been to Burning Man, I don't think more than 2 or 3 would have picked you, Doug. And
I know.
I love the fact that you went there. Just, you're full of surprises, brother. I absolutely love it.
Yep. Yeah. So, all right, let's get back into it. What do you got for topic number 2?
Yeah, topic number 2 was kind of a fun one for me. So the members of the European Union got together to have a conversation about their trade strategies and their outlook for the course of the next 20 to 25 years. And they said something so European, Doug. They said, we will no longer approach our major partners with such naivete any longer. And they just sort of put their nose up in the air. And I imagine they took their scarf and threw it over their shoulder and, took a nibble on a Macron and then a sip of an Aperol spritz and then ignored everyone for a little while and had a huff about it. But part of me is kind of proud of them for making a stand and just sort of saying enough, and like dramatically slamming the table and then putting on their headphones to listen to Depeche Mode for 20 minutes. They, in all seriousness, the response is that they feel that they have been incredibly patient, particularly with the United States, on looking for ways to build a relationship that is not so one-sided. They feel that they have been victimized by the trade practices of the United States. They've been looking for a way that these two nations and organizations of nations can look for some way to develop a more equitable relationship. And they just have not come to a way where we can come to the table together as partners, not as partner and junior partner, but on an equal footing. And they're going to start negotiating and developing strategy on an equal footing. And when it comes to China, they're going to just start dealing with China as a nation that they know takes advantage of them in every turn with regards to dumping and dropping cheap crap on them at every turn. But then when they try to go into China, they can't do the same. Now, talk is cheap, Doug. Talk is cheap. And I've heard this kind of stuff from every country around the world. But when push comes to shove, people like American crap, particularly high-end aerospace and pharmaceuticals, weapon systems, services and software. So we'll see. We'll see. And consumers like cheap crap. They like it a lot. So we'll see exactly what they do when it comes time to keep the people that vote for them happy when holidays and back to school and everything else comes around. And, European consumers want their cheap crap from China. So, hey, you know what? Golf clap for standing up for yourself. But let's see whether or not you break up with that chick who's been treating you like trash. Let's see if you actually pull it off.
Yeah, when you were talking there, the one thing that just coming in my mind, I think Elaine Bennis said it best: yada yada yada.
Yada yada
Right.
yada yada yada. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't, the one thing about that, Pete, is I don't. How many people are in the EU? It's like freaking 25, or I mean, there's a lot, right? And so I get that they want to throw their scarf over their shoulder and pound their fist, but the reality of it is there's 27 interests in that group. And if you try to corral in any facet of life 27 people who are trying to be a collective but still have their own agendas, it's going to be really hard to have that fist pounding have any weight behind it, right? So I get it, and there's probably a few things they could do, but the bottom line is a country is looking for the best interest of itself, and to have 27 best interests come together to take on global world powers is a lot of golf clapping and a lot of yada, yada, yada. So I don't think anything's going to really transpire with this other than a soundbite that you and I read for about 30 seconds on a Monday morning or Tuesday morning.
Like Coach Prime said, Doug, I've got the receipts. I'll be waiting. I'll be waiting post game. I'll be pointing out who said what, pal.
Yep. Yes. I love it. That's a whole nother topic with Coach Prime. We'll see after this weekend. So
yep.
Anyway, well, hey, my last one is a little quick here, but I was reading that this is the trucking industry and layoffs and right sizing and trying to insulate the balance sheet and all the fuzzy buzzwords that executives use to justify layoffs and right sizing. It's all been focused on frontline in the trucking industry, right? It's been drivers that have been let go through yellow. It's been contrition and trying to make their fleet smaller. But the one thing that caught my attention this weekend was that Swift did a whole bunch of layoffs in supporting roles, right? Not frontline drivers or people pushing dispatch and things of that nature, but these are IT people. These are HR employees. So it's almost the supporting roles of this are starting to be impacted, which is very interesting to me to see. Is it cutting that deep now? And are we going to see other multinationals coming in there and doing the same things where the knife is cutting deeper than just the front line? And what does that mean? Should there be a panic out there? Is it going to mean people are going to be jumping ship? And the one group that is a wild card, Pete, on this whole thing is owner operators, right? The guys out there that have 1 to 10 trucks or whatever amount you want, 5 to 15 trucks, whatever, the small guys who is driving the truck and paying the bills and all that kind of stuff. So with all this change and pivot, with sometimes there's drivers entering the market because of situations like yellow with these multinationals, but what's going to go on with the owner operators? Are they going to hunker down and just hold on for dear life, or are they going to rise up and take advantage of the situation because of their low overhead and their cost structures where they can be more competitive? And even though there's lots of capacity, come in and take advantage of it. So as all of these things are happening, and now that the knife is cutting into supporting roles, I'm interested to see what the backstory is and the page 2 story of what's going to happen with owner operators. Are they going to follow suit? Or are they going to pivot in a different direction and they're going to have their day in the sun in 2024? So anyway, owner operators, I'm interested to see how they're going to respond to all this.
Hey, Doug, I'm going to go day in the sun on this one. I think that the fact that they have the ability to actually control an asset and they can be a little more flexible given the fact that they have financial control of that asset and the ability to put that asset where it needs to be and to work with a bit more control. I think that that's going to put them in the right kind of place. No matter where the market has gone up and down, constrained, unconstrained, they've just been in a better position than a lot of these other folks have been, and they've been more consistent. So I think that they're going to find themselves in a good place. Could be wrong. Honestly, I hope I'm not. Not. They've made the investment. They should get the payoff.
Yeah. It's good points. Good points. We'll see. That'll be the one.
All right. Well, 4 topics and a half time. I know I'm exhausted, Doug. But that's going to do it for another edition of Global Trade This Week. I'm Pete Mento, and that's Doug in his crazy shirt. I still can't believe he's actually let it go a little
I
bit
still
this
got
week.
the white T-shirt, so I'm not going too crazy.
You're not. But for the boys in the booth, for Keenan and Doug and I, thank you all for joining us. And thank you to Cap Logistics, as always, for supporting the show. Tell your friends to subscribe, and we'll see you again next week for another edition of Global Trade This Week. Thanks, Doug.
Excellent. Thanks, Pete.
See you, buddy.